So, I've done many different kinds of videos on this channel. I do films, as most of you know, primarily. My friends and I make films. We mainly do films based on like Batman, Michael Myers, you know, pop culture figures like that. We've made films like Son of Michael, Greaser and Soch, Kingpin of Gotham, and Blue Moon. I've also done toy reviews as well. I've done a couple of them. I reviewed something from my childhood from Power Ranger Samurai. I reviewed the Duck plushie, and that's pretty much it as of right now. And I've also done a video for a college project where I show you how to move and dance like Elvis Presley. So yeah, quite unique, I gotta say. But today I want to cover a different topic, and it's an event that happened 15 years ago, and that is the death of Don Brancheau at SeaWorld Orlando. And it's a little bit of a video essay too on Orca Captivity. Many of you know that I am a college student. I do go to college while I do this channel as mainly just an expensive hobby, quite honestly. But it's not film that I'm studying, if that surprises anyone. I am striving towards being a marine biologist, actually. And I've had a love for orcas and other species of whales, dolphins, and porpoises since I was 8 years old. And if you look around my room, if you know, for those who have been in my room, yeah, I've got a lot of whale stuff. Some of it I've got around here on this chair. I'm also let me get this out, there it goes, blushing. A certified marine naturalist. I took the marine naturalist training program on San Juan Island when I was just 16 years old. This is an adult program, by the way, but they made an exception for me and accepted me when I was a minor. I took the program, took the classes, went to San Juan Island, and I saw a pod of transient orcas, actually. They were hunting, which was, it was really cool to see. I actually do need to dust this thing. It's quite dusty, but yeah, this is my certification right here for completing the program. And I am now a certified marine naturalist, certified by the Whale Museum. But yes, I've had a fondness and fascination for those large marine mammals since I was 8 years old. It's been quite a long time. Dawn Brancheau was a 40-year-old senior orca trainer at SeaWorld Orlando, and she was considered to be the best trainer there out of all three parks at the time. And she basically did everything right. She would double check to make sure everyone was doing what they were supposed to. She knew all the cues. She would critique herself during shows. She would like record it and critique herself and figure out how she could do better. She was the best animal trainer there out of all three SeaWorld parks. And one of the orcas she had a close relationship with was Tilikum. Tilikum is to date the largest orca to be ever held in captivity. At 2 years of age, when he was caught in the waters of Iceland, he was already 11.5 feet long. So he was already going to be a pretty big male orca. But despite this close bond and relationship that Dawn Brancheau and Tilikum had, February 24th, 2010 would be Dawn Brancheau's death day, where during the Dine with Shamu show, she would be grabbed by the arm by Tilikum, dragged into the pool, and unfortunately mauled by this orca, and she would become the fourth person to ever be killed by an orca. All four deaths happening in captivity, and Tilikum being responsible for 3 of the 4 deaths. The death of Dawn Brancheau took the world by storm. It was national headline news. Everyone was talking about it, especially animal experts like Jack Hanna.
First responders, they are SeaWorld.
Okay, there
Sure,
are plenty of nonprofit organizations that are doing tremendous work to try to stop the slaughter of whales.
In the wake of a trainer's death 1 month ago, Dawn Brancheau was dragged underwater by the largest male killer whale.
$1 billion. This is about money. This animal in question, Tilly, the killer whale, was born in the waters off Iceland, born free, and it was kidnapped, abducted in the early 1980s.
Remembering that these are wild animals, and they are unpredictable because we don't speak whale. We don't speak whale, we don't speak tiger, we don't speak monkey.
His mother told a national TV audience about why they're suing SeaWorld and her son's emotional scars.
And for more than a quarter of a century, it has spent its life going round and round in circles in a tank. The human equivalent would be sticking a human being in a bathtub. Now, if you were in a bathtub for 25 years, don't you think you'd get a little irritated, aggravated, maybe a little psychotic? This animal was speaking with its fins saying, "Get me out of this damn tank."
This was not an isolated incident. Trainers have been attacked by orcas before, not all of them being fatal, of course, but they have, been attacked before.
But Ann's leg is locked in his powerful jaws.
Most of the time when incidents like this happen, especially when they're not fatal, SeaWorld just tries to play it off as, orcas just playing, or as an error by the trainer, or if they are fatal, the trainer just drowned. Eyewitnesses, didn't go along with that and told the true story. Then SeaWorld went to saying that it was the ponytail that Tillicum grabbed to drag Dawn Brancheau into the tank, and that it was her fault. If she didn't have such a long ponytail, then this wouldn't have happened. This is basically a subtle way of putting the blame on Dawn's shoulders, blaming her for her own death. And then, of course, eyewitnesses, disputed that again and said it was actually her arm. So now SeaWorld, kind of just had to accept that this was a brutal attack on this girl. This unfortunate incident also opened up the OSHA versus SeaWorld case, which lasted a few years, where OSHA was saying that it's too dangerous for trainers to be in the water with the orcas, and then SeaWorld was fighting to keep trainers in the water with the orcas so they could still interact with them during the shows. In the end, the judge, they ruled in favor of OSHA, and now every SeaWorld park has barriers in between the trainers and the orcas, and the trainers are no longer allowed to get into the water with the orcas. But what exactly led up to this unfortunate incident that happened? Well, if you want to fully understand everything that there is to know, you have to go back almost 60 years. The orca trade, started back in the 1960s. That's decades ago, and it's a lot to cover, quite honestly. So rather than, going through the history of orca captivity, there's plenty of other videos you can watch. In fact, I'll put some in the cards up here that I would highly suggest. I am going to talk about the cons of keeping orcas in captivity and why they don't belong in captivity. I would highly recommend you also watch the videos up in the cards up above. And also, I would recommend you watch the 2013 documentary Blackfish, which is actually on Netflix at the time I'm recording this.
When you look into their eyes, you know somebody is home.
They're an animal that possesses great spiritual power, not to be meddled with.
And it is primarily about the incident that happened on February 24th, 2010. And I think it basically up until 2013, anything there is to know about orca captivity, it explains it pretty well. Now, of course, a lot of things have happened since that documentary came out. It actually made a huge impact and gave, it really, changed the public's mindset on SeaWorld and keeping whales and dolphins and porpoises in captivity. Of some things one of the big things that happened was the orca breeding program that SeaWorld had was discontinued in 2016. They did breed their own orcas there, and they now have stopped that. First bullet point is capture trauma. Now, most orcas these days are bred in captivity, but obviously not all orcas in captivity in all of history were bred in captivity. Many were taken from the wild. And it's outlawed in U.S. waters now, but there's still countries like Russia and Japan that, they still capture orcas. One of the infamous captures took place on August 8th, 1970 in the waters of Washington, in Puget Sound, I believe it was. This is the Pen Cove roundup, where 7 young orcas they always pick the young ones because, you know, shipping costs and, you know, they're easier to handle than the adults. They took 7 young orcas, ripped them from their mothers, and shipped them to different parks around the world. The last survivor of the Penn Cove captures, she died back in 2023, Lolita. She survived over 40 years. I think at this point it was like over 50 years in captivity, which is not normal. You rarely see that. In captivity, most orcas, you know, only live to be maybe like 13, maybe 15, especially female orcas, while in the wild, orcas live equivalent to human lifespans. You know, males usually live up to like 50 to 60 years, and females have been recorded living over 100 years. The great example being Granny, the southern resident orca that lived to be 105. Orcas have very complex emotions and are very social and emotional animals. And when you rip a calf away from their mother, keep in mind, orcas stay with their mothers their entire lives, at least most do. There are some transient orca populations where male orcas will leave their mothers, but most of the time, in most populations, calves will stay with their mothers their entire lives. When you just rip that calf away from their mother, it just creates a traumatic effect that will probably impact them for the rest of their life. Ted Griffin was the first man to ever capture an orca. The first orca to be ever held in captivity, mainly, you know, for show business, was Namu. He was an orca that was found in a fishing net in the Northwest waters, and Ted Griffin bought him for, I believe it was $8,000. And Ted Griffin himself trained with Namu and was the first person ever to swim with an orca. And later on, not too long later, he caught Shamu. This is a female orca calf, and, you know, she plus Namu equals Shamu.
After a few months, Griffin captured a companion for Namu. This was a 2-year-old female, Shamu.
And that's how you got the big commercial name that SeaWorld uses now. Ted Griffin harpooned and killed Shamu's mother right in front of her eyes. And when Ted Griffin would try to get in the water with Shamu to work with her, Shamu would ram Ted Griffin into walls and be very aggressive towards him. So you could definitely see that it's created a lasting effect on Shamu, watching that man kill her mother. Shamu would be shipped to, I believe it was SeaWorld San Diego, and she lived for another 6 years before dying. She was just too aggressive towards Ted for him to keep her. And Namu, after I believe 11 months in captivity in that Seattle aquarium, committed suicide actually. One day he just started repeatedly banging his head against the gate and gave himself brain damage, and many people believe that was a suicide act right there. And the stories of Namu and Shamu and the Penn Cove captures, they're not the worst cases of cetacean, you know, captures and roundups, because unfortunately something terrible goes on in Taiji, Japan, and has been going on for years. It was exposed in 2009 in the award-winning documentary The Cove.
They take the boats around to the secret cove that nobody could see. They said if the world finds out what goes on here, we'll be shut down. They were hiding something.
Not all of them are slaughtered. Some are slaughtered so they could sell dolphin meat, which is heavily contaminated with mercury, might I add. So those who are eating it are contaminating themselves and putting their children at risk. But some of the dolphins are caught for, obviously, you know, the dolphin trade, you know, selling them to different parks around the world. A lot of these dolphins are brought to, you know, swim with dolphin programs, which I'm sure there are a few people watching this video that have, you know, went to, you know, Discovery Cove or some kind of program where you get to swim with a dolphin, you get to hug it, you get to hold its dorsal fin, you get to kiss it, you get to take a picture with it. Just so you know, this probably came from this. just want you to let that, I just want that to settle in. That little camera prop, you know, for your Instagram story, for your Instagram posts. Yeah, that dolphin watched many of its pod mates get slaughtered right in front of its eyes. Just want you to know. And you may be saying, well, they always look happy, you know, like they always seem like they're like, you know, they don't. I promise you that they really don't. Cetaceans experience a great amount of depression in captivity because it's not natural. Honestly, no one has really created a perfect captive environment for an orca or a dolphin. It's kind of different with, you know, land animals, like, you know, like land mammals like elephants and tigers. There are some zoos that create ideal environments for them that replicate, you know, what their habitat would be in the wild in Africa and Asia, but no one's perfected that when it comes to orcas and dolphins. It's just impossible. I mean, we still really don't know how to handle these animals. And why it's not natural goes into my next bullet point, which is food deprivation, the reward system, and just the circus act altogether. It's not done as much nowadays, especially not in America, but food deprivation was a way of trainers getting the behaviors that they wanted out of the animals. Sea Land of the Pacific, for example, would use food deprivation as punishment, and also a way of getting the 3 orcas that they had, one of them being Tilikum actually, into these steel boxes, like these sheds, in for the night. They would keep the orcas in those sheds because their park was in a cove in a marina, and they were scared that someone at night would cut the nets and let them go, so they had to keep them in these sheds and lock them in there. And they would use food deprivation to get them in there. If they're hungry enough, they're going to go in there. You get them in there, and you just close that gate, like close that door, and those orcas are locked in these little spaces for the night. And a lot of times they would come out with blood and scratches and such, and it's kind of shocking to think about. It really is, especially for Tilikum, who, again, largest orca in captivity, and probably one of the largest recorded, period, wild in captivity. And these are animals that need to eat hundreds of pounds of, if it's like a resident orca, they need to eat like close to maybe like 200-300 pounds of fish in a day just to satisfy themselves. You don't get that in captivity. You know, they just gotta perform tricks in order to get what they want. They have to satisfy the trainers in order to get the food that they need. And a lot of the orcas aren't even resident orcas. There are many different ecotypes of orcas, and they have different diets, they have different cultures, they have different languages. And Tilikum, for example, was biologically a transient orca. A transient orca that probably should have been eating animals like seals and sea lions and, you know, baleen whales like humpbacks and blues, and he's just being fed fish. And I mean, that's all he's gonna get, you know? They're not gonna give him anything else. Then there's cramp tanks, chlorinated water, and also sunburns as well. The chlorinated water, so orcas hydrate off of the seawater that they, you know, swim in the ocean, and they don't get that. It's at SeaWorld. It's chlorinated seawater, and if anything, it actually dehydrates them. This has resulted in many of the orcas at SeaWorld being drugged so they can get the hydration that they need. And a lot of the orcas also have sunburns too, because the tanks are not that deep, and the orcas really can't dive very far, if at all. And they're exposed to the sun quite a lot, especially with it being, you know, Florida, Texas, and California. So they'll get sunburns on them, and again, they also get drugged for that, so they don't suffer from health complications from being exposed to the sun so much. And the tanks are not very big either. There's a lack of exercise within orca captivity. Orcas in the wild swim up to 100 miles a day, and I guarantee you they can probably barely get even a mile or two in those tanks at SeaWorld. They just don't get the proper exercise that they need. And also with cramped tanks, there's just close proximity, and this creates tension, you know, not being able to get away. Tilikum would be ganged up on by females who were more smaller and agile, while Tilikum was larger and didn't, you know, move around as fast, and they would gang up on his ass and beat him up. And why would there be tension and aggression within orca captivity? Well, that's a more complex answer, because here's the thing. The scientific community for years has been reluctant to say that any other species besides humans has culture and languages, but it's very obvious that there are some animals that have cultures and different languages based on where they're from in the world. Orcas being one of them, actually. These aren't just two different killer whales. These are orcas from with different genes and different cultures, and they naturally have, you know, different kinds of diets. It's the mix of SeaWorld's collection. It's like the equivalent of having like a big space, right? Maybe not too big though. And you have an American man, but you have a Japanese woman. And then over there you have a Russian man, and you have, let's say, a French woman right here. You know, that's basically what the equivalent of it is. Like, and yet they can't understand each other. They can't speak each other's language. Many orcas, as a result of these conflicts and this aggression, have been injured, and some have even died. Porky, for example, her jaw was broken by two orcas that ganged up on her, and she bled out, and just her body just sunk to the bottom of the pool while the pool filled with blood. It was a gruesome sight for a lot of the trainers that witnessed it, and of course you'll see this video right here too. It's probably worth noting that these animals are hard to keep in captivity, mainly because they're completely alien. They're completely alien creatures, and one factor that, you know, kind of supports that is they have a part of the brain that humans don't have, that Lori Marino, a neuroscientist who specializes in cetacean psychology studies, discovered. It's called the paralimbic cleft in the limbic system of the orca brain. And this part of the brain, you know, processes high frequent emotions. And it's safe to say that these animals live highly social, highly emotional lives. I could explain this a lot better. I don't exactly have a script, and I could explain a lot more if I wanted to, but I don't want this video to be too long, and I wanted to tell this more based on feel, because I feel highly attached to these animals. I really do. I really love these animals. I'm very fascinated by them. I really feel sorry for any orca that had to go through trauma like that and has to live a life where they kind of just move lifelessly in a pool and, you know, look like they're having a good time when they're not during shows. They only get fed when they do what they're supposed to. And, you know, watching male orcas have the flopped over dorsal fins in captivity as well, which happens in the wild, but it's only about 1% of wild orcas that have the flopped over dorsal fin. I feel sorry when I see them. I do. Swimming around in a pool, not even getting a mile in, when compared to wild orcas that swim up to 100 miles a day, it's sad to see. And I hope, despite this video, you know, not exactly being the best video put together when it comes to this kind of topic, that you go away feeling the same way. And basically the message I'm trying to spread is, don't buy a ticket to any marine park, any zoo that holds orcas in captivity, or dolphins, or porpoises for that matter. I personally, I don't go to aquariums like that. I don't even go to the zoo. I don't like the zoo. I just won't go. And I hope that you maybe all feel the same way. It's a message I'm trying to spread. It really is. This topic is very serious to me. And when I found out about the horrors that go on in SeaWorld when I was 9 years old, I found out from Blackfish, actually. Which, again, I recommend you guys watch. It's on Netflix and sometimes free on YouTube. When I watched that documentary, how I saw those parks just completely changed. Mind you, 3 months before I saw the documentary, I went to SeaWorld for my birthday. And, I mean, I was just as deceived as the general public was at the time. It looked like the happiest place on earth, especially for the animals. It looked like they were happy. It looked like they were having a good time. But they weren't. I'm glad I went though. Maybe just like compare, because I've seen wild orcas now and now I can compare. And it's safe to say that I appreciated the experience of seeing wild orcas over captive orcas, because I saw right then and there how it's supposed to be. If I am to ever have children, and that's a big if I am to ever have children, I don't want them growing up thinking it's normal and acceptable to keep these highly evolved creatures in concrete pools. I don't want my children to think that's how we treat the animals that we find ourselves on this planet with. I don't want them to think that's how we treat them. And I don't want anyone to think that that's how we should treat animals in this world. It's supposed to be more about Don Brancheau and Tillicum, but it was really just a build up to why orcas should be held in captivity, which I could go into more depth. I could talk about this all day, but again, video length. It's an unfortunate incident that happened, and I think it's one that really, made people wake up. It's what spawned the 2013 documentary Blackfish, and that's what opened people's eyes. One last little detail. There's gonna be a lot of you that are gonna be like, well, what about dogs and cats? We keep them in houses. I'm sorry. Those animals, dogs and cats, like that you keep as pets, they're bred to be domesticated. Thousands of years ago, dogs didn't even exist. It was just wolves. And we basically bred wolves, a lot of species of wolves, to, be more people friendly, if you will. There's probably a better term for that, but basically they've been domesticated. The great example being the pug. The pug is barely a dog. It's like deprived of all features that makes it a dog. You release a pug out into the wild, it's not lasting 2 days. It's got no sharp teeth, no claws. It's not big. It's not fast. You're screwing it over. You can't domesticate an orca or a dolphin. I'm just saying. You can't. There's a reason why, this just hasn't worked out.